Frieren Beyond Journey's End is a 2023/2024 fantasy anime about some Kirito looking motherfucker who gets hit by a truck, sent to a fantasy world where he becomes the most special, powerful boy in the world who's gotta go stop the great demon king. But in the meantime, he's gonna go from town to town, be worshipped, fight bad guys who fall to him instantly, and of course, get a ever-growing harem of girls of varying fetishes. Wait. I'm being told that's not what Frieren's about. But how? How could that be possible? In today's modern anime landscape, it's like the only way a fantasy anime gets popular is if it's a fucking isekai that is just a male power fantasy just endlessly all the time. How could something come and change that status quo? Oh wait, that's my job as a YouTuber to talk about that and give my reasoning in a hopefully intelligent 10-minute discussion video. So let's do that. Let's do that. Shall we? Let us begin. So yeah, if you couldn't tell from the opening bit, we're going to be talking today about how Frieren became the biggest anime in the world, despite the fact that, like, everything should be against it. I've talked ad nauseum about how I can't stand isekai, and I hate the effect they have had on fantasy anime as a whole. So many fantasy shows nowadays are just like I described in the intro, just an isekai that operates on video game logic and is just a really bad pandering male power fantasy. That's not to say there have not been successful fantasy anime over the past few years. There's literally one airing as we speak. And that's also not to say there aren't isekai I like. However, after a while, I can only read the same premise so many times and see the same character design so many times before it starts to feel mind-numbing, dull, and stale. And I am a big believer in that is part of the reason Frieren felt like such a breath of fresh air. This felt like a series that went out of its way to feel different, to be unique. That's not to say there aren't fantasy stories that talk about mages, that are about elves or women or the concept of immortality. There's tons, and a lot of them are great. But I feel like it's not a coincidence that this show became so popular when so many of its contemporaries feel like it should be so much better than it or bigger than it. So let us talk about why. We're 3 minutes in, we haven't really gotten anywhere. I think the best place to start with Frieren is the premise, because the premise alone, I think, is a really great way to get people invested. So, the idea to Frieren is that the big battle's over. That's it. It's done. The hero got his crew together. They went. They stopped the Demon King. The world is free. So then what happens? This concept alone, I feel like, gets a lot of people's attention. Just the idea of, well, what happens next? Remember, the whole thing that brought Game of Thrones, at least the original books about, was the idea of what happens when the toxic masculine king just does what they do. And that's sort of where that story propels. And it's sort of like you have a similar concept here of what happens to the perfunctory mage who knows a lot about magic and is like unaging, so therefore they're detached but get invested in the main character and all that stuff. What happens to that person? And by making your story about that, you immediately give yourself the interesting challenge of just coming up with a story around that premise. How does someone who is ageless be affected by an ever-changing world? How do they react as those friends they fought with age and move on with their lives while they kind of stay the same? How do they learn and grow and meet new people? And that's what Frieren at its core is really about. This is a series not really concerned with like big fights, although there are some very spectacular Sakuga moments in this show. It's not really concerned about an overly big plot because the plot is Frieren's adventures. It's about her as she goes on and makes new connections and helps people along the way and all these different things. And yeah, it's pretty freaking strong. Just the sheer fact that you've kind of made things feel a little bit different is enough to, I think, get a lot of people invested. But you need to really have something propelling it from there. And I think you have that in the form of Frieren herself, who doesn't really have a big goal. Yeah, we're still kind of on just the fact that how does an immortal mage get through life? And they don't really have like a big ambition. She just wants to journey around, find new magic, learn new spells, and just kind of have a little fun along the way. And I think that's a great way to make you want to follow her. It means that the show isn't about some big arbitrary destiny that was thrust upon the main character and they just do it because they have to. Frieren is doing all this because she wants to. You're endeared to the character because the story is about her making choices and going along with them. But of course, she needs to have a good supporting cast. In fact, we should probably just talk about the characters as a whole, probably with Frieren herself. And Frieren as a character is great. She is a fuck ton of fun. The idea of someone who has that kind of like ageless, detached, emotionless feel to her, but is also kind of like down to earth and takes interest in what's around her. The way she's always interested in new towns she goes in, learning new things about the world around her. It's a great way to get your world building across while also keeping your main character likable. You always learn all these interesting details about the various places you visit just through the fact that she wants to know so she can learn new magic and spells, and you want to see your main character want things. That's such a thing that so many series nowadays forget, that characters should have a goal and not just be a self-insert for the audience. But yeah, you then naturally need to have a strong supporting cast behind that. You, of course, have Fern, who is pretty popular in both the reaction face department and in certain other artwork departments, but she's a great character in her own right. The idea of Frieren having an apprentice who, because Frieren, naturally because she ages so slowly, still has the mental maturity of someone in her like early 20s, while Fern mentally matures at a more natural rate and therefore is kind of becoming more of an adult than her actual surrogate mother figure, which leads to a lot of fun, especially when you realize that Fern kind of inherited Frieren's sort of sense of like not really expressing herself. So then when it explodes in the form of several various fun scenes in the show, really leads to a really enduring character. You also have Stark, who might be my favorite character. Just this like normal down-to-earth guy who has a lot of skill, but is also willing to acknowledge he has a long way to go and that he's not a perfect, flawless human being and that he has to just keep training and getting to know people and interacting with people. This leads to a really great, likable trio who go on various adventures and meet various other characters along the way. And these three really do support the story and make it feel strong. As for the other elements, we should probably get to that before we wrap up. The show is visually gorgeous. This is the same person who did Bocchi the Rock, and it shows. The animation, especially in the last chunk of episodes, is genuinely breathtaking and a lot of fun. You have some really great music. You have some really great world designs and character designs. Every aspect of this show really came together to really give you a fun, unique experience you will not forget anytime soon. Are there any problems with the show? Well, I mean, like, the episodic nature can get a little old. Naturally, not every episode is perfect, and you will probably not pay attention to several of the more by-the-numbers episodes, but there are so many standouts, I think it's more than worth trudging through one or two to get something you really like. I will also say that, for those of you who don't remember, they aired the first 3 episodes together. I think this was very much by design because they knew the first 3 episodes were the strongest, really showing Frieren as an immortal and what that means for the world around her. And the rest of it kind of gets into a formula, which is good, very well done. But it doesn't change the fact it's sort of like the up problem of you feel like the strongest stuff is at the beginning and the rest of the show is just kind of catapulting off that. But All in all, Frieren is a great series, many people's favorite anime of the year. I did not include it in my list because, well, I never include stuff that's still ongoing, save for a couple of exceptions, just in case things go wrong in the end. But this show delivered 100%, and I can't wait for more. But yeah, in the comment section below, give me your thoughts on Frieren. What were your favorite parts? What were your favorite Fern reaction faces? And what do you hope to see from fantasy anime now that we're sort of seeing a bit of a fight back against the Isekai onslaught? Tell me about that in the comment section below. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and join me for more talking about anime. Maybe we'll get to that other fantasy anime when it eventually wraps up.